I had never liked the Galactic Council nexus. To most species, it was the center of civilization. To me, it felt like a monument to civilizations that believed they had already seen every danger the galaxy could produce. I stood behind Ambassador Evelyn Brooks as part of Earth's diplomatic escort. My job was simple: stay quiet, stay alert, and protect the ambassador if diplomacy failed. Humans had been council members for only 23 years. Most delegates barely noticed us. The emergency session began as the chamber darkened. A hologram of the Ashen Rift appeared above the assembly. One exploration ship had vanished. Then 2 rescue cruisers. Then an entire Vorex battle squadron. 27 fleets had disappeared without a single distress call. Uneasy whispers spread through the chamber. General Kara Voss demanded immediate military action, while the ancient powers argued over responsibility. I studied the tactical display in silence. Ships didn't simply disappear. Not unless they never knew they were being hunted. The arguments stopped the moment another transmission arrived. The image above the council floor flickered before stabilizing into the final recording from a patrol cruiser near the Ashen Rift. I watched the bridge crew scramble as alarms screamed through the ship. There were no enemy signatures, no weapons lock, nothing that explained their panic. Then something emerged from the darkness. It wasn't built like a starship. Black plates shifted over a living frame, pulsing as though the vessel itself breathed. Tendrils spread from its hull and wrapped around the cruiser. Within seconds the recording dissolved into static. Silence consumed the chamber. The attackers have been identified, the speaker announced, his voice unusually strained. The surviving data cores classify them as an unknown biomechanical species. Temporary designation: Void Reapers. The name spread through the delegates like poison. Reports flooded the chamber one after another. Colonies had gone silent. Entire defense fleets had vanished without leaving wreckage. Every engagement followed the same pattern. The enemy never negotiated, never transmitted, never pursued survivors. They simply appeared, destroyed everything in their path, and disappeared back into the Ashen Rift. As fear grew, another crisis erupted. A Vorex admiral accused humanity of moving warships near disputed border systems. Our ambassador immediately denied the claim, but several delegates demanded an investigation. Within minutes the discussion shifted from the Reapers to politics. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. An unknown species was erasing fleets from existence, yet half the council argued about border violations. General Kara Voss turned toward our delegation. The Human Federation would do well to remember its place. Her cold silver eyes settled on me for only a moment before dismissing me entirely. To her, I wasn't an officer. I was furniture. I remained silent. Sometimes the most dangerous mistake an enemy can make is believing you don't matter. The emergency session continued for hours, but nothing useful came from it. The oldest civilizations argued over protocols while fresh reports of disappearing fleets arrived almost every hour. Every proposal was delayed by procedure. Every warning drowned beneath politics. I stood where I had been ordered to stand, hands behind my back, watching the room instead of the speakers. People reveal more when they think nobody is paying attention. The military officers studied tactical projections with growing uncertainty. Diplomats whispered about evacuating border systems before admitting the danger publicly. Scientists searched desperately for patterns that didn't exist. No one noticed the pattern that mattered. The attacks weren't random. Each fleet had entered the Ashen Rift believing it controlled the situation. Every commander followed predictable formations. Every rescue force repeated the mistakes of the previous one. Someone, or something, was learning. Ambassador Brooks leaned toward me without taking her eyes off the council floor. You've been awfully quiet. I wasn't invited to speak. That has never stopped you before. I allowed myself the smallest smile. It isn't my turn yet. She knew me well enough not to ask another question. Across the chamber, General Kara Voss addressed the assembly with absolute confidence. The Vorex Empire will deploy 3 additional battle groups into the rift. Superior firepower has ended every major conflict in our history. It will end this one. The chamber erupted in approving voices. Ancient admirals nodded. Veteran commanders applauded the decision. They were preparing to send thousands more soldiers into exactly the kind of trap that had already consumed 27 fleets. I looked down at the battle reports displayed on my tablet one final time. The casualty lists, the attack timelines, the missing sensor data. A single sentence formed in my mind. If your enemy hunts like a predator, then every fleet entering together is just a larger meal. I closed the tablet. Sooner or later someone would ask what I thought. I only hoped they would ask before another fleet disappeared. The council finally ran out of arguments. One by one, the delegates exhausted every familiar solution. Larger fleets, stronger shields, more escorts. None of it explained why 27 task forces had vanished without leaving enough debris to identify a battlefield. The speaker looked around the chamber. Does anyone have an alternative proposal? Silence answered him. Ambassador Brooks glanced at me. It was almost invisible. A slight nod. Permission. I stepped away from the diplomatic platform and walked toward the center of the chamber. Hundreds of eyes followed me with mild curiosity. Some delegates frowned, trying to remember my name. Most had never noticed me before. General Kara Voss folded her arms. The human escort wishes to address the council? She asked, unable to hide her amusement. The speaker hesitated before nodding. You may speak briefly. I looked up at the projection of the Ashen Rift. 27 fleet markers glowed red. 27 failures. They, re-hunting you. The room remained silent. They done, T-attack planets. They done, T-raid supply depots. They wait until a military force enters their territory, isolate it, and destroy it before help arrives. A Korath admiral scoffed. That is obvious. No, I answered calmly. What's obvious is that you keep giving them exactly what they want. Several officers exchanged confused looks. I continued. If your enemy hunts like a predator, you cannot defeat it with fear. I let the words settle before finishing. You must make it hunt the wrong prey. General Kara Voss laughed openly. And what wisdom follows that statement, human? You stop thinking like soldiers. I met her gaze without raising my voice. You start thinking like survivors. The chamber erupted into overlapping protests. Absurd. Primitive thinking. Survival is not strategy. I waited until the noise faded. Every fleet UV sent entered in perfect formation. Every commander followed doctrine. Every rescue mission repeated the previous one's mistakes. I pointed toward the hologram. They, re-studying your habits. So stop giving them habits to study. For the first time since entering the chamber. No one laughed immediately. The silence lasted only a heartbeat. Then the laughter began. Not nervous laughter. Genuine amusement echoed through the council chamber as delegates exchanged knowing glances. Several commanders shook their heads, convinced they had just witnessed youthful confidence mistaken for military insight. General Kara Voss took a single step toward me. You are a junior officer, she said. You command no fleet. You have fought no galactic campaigns. Yet you presume to lecture civilizations that have mastered warfare for thousands of years? Her words drew approving murmurs. The Vorex Empire has defeated empires older than your entire species, she continued. Our battle doctrine is studied across the galaxy. We do not require lessons from an ordinary human. I held her gaze. I wasn't offering a lesson. No, I was offering a warning. Her expression hardened. The difference is irrelevant. Around the chamber, ancient admirals quietly dismissed everything I had said. Some returned to discussing fleet formations. Others debated how many additional battleships would be sufficient to overwhelm the creatures inside the Ashen Rift. More ships, more firepower. The same answer that had already failed 27 times. Ambassador Brooks remained silent behind me. She knew arguing would only make the situation worse. Sometimes people refused to hear the truth until reality forced them to listen. The speaker cleared his throat. The Council appreciates the Human Federation's perspective. Even he struggled to hide his skepticism. Military planning will proceed under the existing strategic framework. That was the end of it. I nodded once and stepped away from the speaking platform. No anger, no frustration, just acceptance. You couldn't force people to survive. You could only tell them where the cliff was. Whether they stopped walking was their decision. As I returned to Earth's delegation, I noticed Kara Voss watching me with open contempt. To her, I was an inexperienced officer who had embarrassed himself before the entire galaxy. She had no idea that experience and rank meant very little when facing a predator. On Earth, survival had always belonged to those willing to learn before everyone else. Out there, in the darkness of the Ashen Rift, something else had already learned that lesson. The emergency session ended without a decision worth remembering. The Council authorized another expedition into the Ashen Rift, and every proposal I had made vanished beneath official reports and ceremonial speeches. Humanity's delegation prepared to leave the Nexus while the Vorex officers celebrated what they believed would be a decisive victory. 3 days later, I was aboard the diplomatic cruiser Resolute, escorting Ambassador Brooks back toward human territory. The voyage should have been routine. It wasn't. Our long-range sensors detected multiple Vorex warships emerging from hyperspace directly ahead. Their flagship, the Iron Dominion, dwarfed every vessel in our convoy. Within seconds, our communications channels filled with encrypted military traffic. "This is General Kara Voss," a cold voice announced. "Power down your engines immediately. You are entering restricted Vorex security space." Captain Ellis frowned. "That's impossible. This corridor belongs to neither side." "It does now." The transmission ended. Targeting alarms screamed throughout the ship. Before we could respond, dozens of locking signals surrounded us. "Weapons powered," the tactical officer shouted. Captain Ellis refused to back down. "Maintain course." The first volley struck our engines. The bridge exploded into chaos as lights failed and consoles showered sparks across the deck. I was thrown against the bulkhead, my ears ringing from the impact. Emergency bulkheads sealed behind us while atmosphere vented from damaged compartments. Another explosion shook the cruiser. We lost propulsion. Shields collapsing. Multiple hull breaches. The Resolute drifted helplessly. There was no battle, only an execution. Boarding pods slammed into our hull. I drew my sidearm, but armored Vorex soldiers flooded the corridor before we could organize a defense. We fought room by room until a rifle butt struck the side of my helmet. Everything went black. When I opened my eyes again, magnetic restraints held my wrists against a steel chair. General Kara Voss stood across the interrogation room, perfectly composed. I warned the Council that humans were becoming troublesome. She folded her arms. "Now I finally have the opportunity to discover whether your confidence survives captivity." I looked around the room once. Then I smiled. Every prison had weaknesses. I only needed time to find them. The first thing I did was stop acting like a prisoner. Fear narrows your vision. Curiosity widens it. So instead of wasting energy pulling against the magnetic restraints, I watched. The interrogation room wasn't built for comfort. Every surface had a purpose. Cameras sat in opposite corners, but neither covered the entire ceiling. The ventilation system cycled every 93 seconds, creating a brief fluctuation in the room's electromagnetic field. Small detail, useful detail. General Kara Voss asked questions for nearly an hour. What was humanity discussing before leaving the Council? Silence. What military assets are hidden near your border? Silence. What did you mean by making the predator hunt the wrong prey? I simply looked at her. The silence irritated her more than any answer could. Eventually she left, posting 2 guards outside the door. That was when the real work began. Vorex discipline was impressive. Almost every guard walked the same route. Every patrol paused at exactly the same intersections. Every security drone followed an identical timing cycle. Efficient. Predictable. Predators loved predictable prey. Meals were delivered twice each standard cycle. The crew never looked directly at me. They had already decided I was defeated, which made them careless. One technician entered carrying a diagnostic scanner and forgot to disable its external interface before leaving. Another officer typed access codes without shielding the keypad. Tiny mistakes. Enough of them become opportunity. Through the reinforced observation window, I occasionally caught glimpses of the ship beyond my cell. Damage control crews hurried through corridors carrying replacement conduits. Engineers argued over shield harmonics. Something had them worried. Then I saw the tactical display reflected in the glass. The Ashen Rift. The flagship wasn't leaving. It was heading deeper inside. That was the first truly bad decision Kara Voss had made. I closed my eyes and replayed every report I had studied. The disappearances, the attack patterns, the missing distress calls. The Void Reapers didn't chase. They waited, like wolves around a trail, like crocodiles beneath still water, like every apex predator Earth had ever produced. Different bodies, same instincts, and instincts could be manipulated. For the first time since my capture, I knew exactly how to fight them. Now I just needed the chance. The galaxy believed I was trapped aboard the Vorex flagship. In reality, I was studying the battlefield before everyone else even realized the hunt had already begun. I had already memorized every sound the flagship made. The hum of the reactors, the rhythm of the patrols, the vibration that passed through the deck whenever the ship corrected its course toward the Ashen Rift. Then the interrogation door opened. General Kara Voss entered alone. She dismissed the guards with a brief gesture before stopping a few steps from me. "I reviewed your service record," she said. "Average evaluations. No famous victories. No command of your own fleet." She tilted her head. "You are remarkably ordinary." I always found that useful. Her expression hardened. "You still believe your survival theories matter?" "I know they do." She stepped closer until only the restraint field separated us. "Then explain why your species keeps hiding behind diplomacy." "Because wars are expensive, and surrender is cheaper?" I smiled faintly. "You assumed I said surrender." For the first time, irritation crossed her face. Without warning, her armored fist struck my jaw. Pain exploded through my skull. The chair slammed backward. Blood filled my mouth. I expected the pain. What I didn't expect was the feeling that followed. Something ancient stirred beneath conscious thought. My heartbeat accelerated. Vision sharpened. Every sound separated into distinct layers. I could hear coolant flowing through pipes beyond the walls. I could hear Kara's breathing. I could hear the tiny electric fluctuations inside my magnetic restraints. Millions of years of evolution on Earth had built a system for one purpose: survive. When a human body accepts that death is possible, it changes. Adrenaline flooded every muscle. My breathing slowed instead of quickening. The pain stopped mattering. Across the room, Kara took an involuntary step backward. She didn't understand why. Neither did I. She had struck prisoners before. None of them had looked back at her like this. Before either of us spoke again, the entire flagship shuddered violently. Red emergency lights flooded the compartment. The alarm wasn't for internal damage. It was worse. Unknown contacts. Multiple hull breaches. They inside the ship. The magnetic restraints flickered as power surged across the deck. The lights died for a fraction of a second. When they came back, the lock holding my wrists disengaged with a metallic click. Somewhere beyond the bulkhead, terrified soldiers opened fire. Then the screaming began. The screams spread through the flagship faster than the alarms. I was on my feet before General Kara Voss recovered from the shock of seeing my restraints unlock. Instinct told me to run. Training told me to arm myself. Experience told me something else. Find the threat. The emergency lighting painted the corridor crimson as I stepped outside the interrogation room. 2 Vorex guards lay motionless near the shattered security door. Their weapons were untouched. Long black marks crossed the walls as if something alive had crawled through solid metal. The Void Reapers were already aboard. A young Vorex soldier rounded the corner, firing wildly into the darkness. His pulse rifle illuminated a nightmare. One of the creatures unfolded from the ceiling, its bladed limbs driving straight through the bulkhead behind him before he even realized it had moved. "Down!" I shouted. The soldier reacted without thinking. The creature missed him by centimeters. I grabbed his shoulder and pulled him behind a support column as another Reaper crashed into the deck. "They too fast," he yelled. "They predators," I answered. "Stop acting like prey." His breathing slowed just enough to hear me. "They attack panic. They follow movement. Dawn, scatter." More soldiers appeared from adjoining corridors, shooting in every direction. The Reapers cut through the formation instantly. They weren't stronger than the Vorex. They were smarter. "They isolating you," I shouted. "Stay together. Cover each other's blind spots." The survivors hesitated. Then they listened. Small groups formed defensive circles instead of chasing shadows. Casualties dropped immediately. General Kara Voss emerged from the smoke, weapon in hand, disbelief written across her face as she watched her own troops obeying the prisoner she had interrogated only minutes earlier. Before she could speak, a Reaper burst through the ceiling above her. "Kara!" She looked up too late. I tackled her sideways. The creature slammed into the deck where she had been standing, its claws punching through armored plating as though it were paper. She stared at me in stunned silence. "You," she whispered. "No time." I forced her back to her feet. "If this ship falls, we all die." For the first time since we had met, General Kara Voss didn't see a human prisoner standing before her. She saw the only person on the flagship who understood how the hunters were thinking. The command bridge was barely recognizable by the time we reached it. Smoke rolled across the ceiling. Sparks rained from ruptured conduits. Dead consoles flickered with broken warnings while officers fought desperately to keep the flagship alive. Through the shattered forward viewport, I could see dozens of Void Reapers tearing through the escort fleet. Ship after ship vanished into clouds of burning debris. General Kara Voss looked at the tactical display. "We losing everything." "No," I replied. "You losing because you fighting the wrong battle." She turned toward me. "What do you mean?" Instead of answering, I walked to the sensor station and pulled up every recording collected since the attack began. The bridge crew watched in confusion. I replayed the footage again and again. The creatures ignored burning plasma. They crossed reactor leaks without slowing. They attacked through explosions without hesitation. Then one recording caught my attention. A damaged coolant pipe had burst during the first assault. The Reaper pursuing a wounded soldier had recoiled for the briefest instant before changing direction. I enlarged the image. Frost covered the nearby deck. The creature had avoided it. "There," I said. Nobody understood. It backed away. An engineer frowned. "From ice?" "Not ice." I highlighted the temperature readings. "Extreme cold." The bridge fell silent. Earth's predators came in every shape imaginable, but they all obeyed biology. No organism ignored the laws of nature forever. Their bodies generate enormous heat, I explained. That's why they move so fast. Drop their temperature fast enough. They slow down, Kara finished. They retreat. She immediately opened a fleet-wide channel. "Can we overload the cooling network?" The chief engineer answered without hesitation. "We can trigger the emergency cryogenic system, but it will freeze half the ship." It'll save the other half," I said. Kara met my eyes. For the first time, she didn't question my judgment. "Do it." Warning sirens echoed throughout the flagship. Seconds later, freezing vapor erupted from every emergency vent. The temperature collapsed. Frost raced across the walls. The Reapers screamed. One after another, the creatures abandoned their attacks, retreating through shattered hulls into open space. Across the fleet, every surviving ship copied the procedure. The impossible had happened. A prisoner the Vorex had tortured had just saved an entire fleet. The battle was over before anyone truly understood what had happened. The surviving Void Reapers disappeared into the darkness of the Ashen Rift, leaving behind crippled ships, frozen corridors, and thousands of stunned soldiers who were still alive only because the enemy had chosen to retreat. I stood on the command bridge, watching damage reports appear one after another. Entire sections of the flagship had been destroyed, but the crew was alive. Across the fleet, rescue ships recovered survivors from drifting escape pods while engineers fought to stabilize failing reactors. General Kara Voss approached me in silence. For several seconds, she simply looked at me. "I struck you," she said quietly. "You did. I imprisoned you. You did. And yet, you saved my crew." I shrugged. "I wasn't saving the Vorex Empire." She frowned. "I was saving people." She lowered her head for the first time since we had met. Among the Vorex, it was a gesture reserved for those who had earned unquestionable respect. Before either of us spoke again, a transmission arrived from the Galactic Council. The emergency session had been reconvened. Every surviving flagship in the sector was ordered to report immediately. The battle recordings were transmitted without editing. Every delegate watched the same impossible sequence. A human officer escaping captivity. A human organizing terrified Vorex soldiers. A human pulling General Kara Voss out of the path of a Void Reaper. A human identifying the creature's weakness within minutes. Silence followed the final recording. No one laughed this time. The civilizations that had dismissed humanity as inexperienced now studied every frame of the battle, searching for an explanation. Military academies requested copies of my tactical decisions. Scientists began analyzing Earth's survival methods. Fleet commanders rewrote emergency protocols based on the actions of a single human officer aboard a dying ship. The galaxy had spent decades believing humanity's greatest strength was endurance. Now they understood something far more unsettling. We adapted. Faster than fear. Faster than doctrine. Sometimes, faster than the enemy itself. The council chamber was quieter than I had ever seen it. No one questioned the battle recordings. Too many witnesses had survived. Too many sensor logs confirmed every second of the fight aboard the Iron Dominion. The impossible had become official history. I stood beside Ambassador Brooks while General Kara Voss occupied the Vorex platform across the chamber. For the first time, our eyes met without hostility. The speaker rose. "Lieutenant Commander Jake Carter, the Council requests humanity's recommendation." Every delegate turned toward me. Weeks earlier, they had laughed when I spoke. Now they waited. I stepped onto the central platform. "The Void Reapers want to be the last biological threat this galaxy faces." No one interrupted. They hunt because they evolved to hunt. Next time it may be something different. Another species. Another instinct. I paused, looking around the chamber. You cannot defeat every threat with bigger fleets. Several admirals lowered their heads. You defeat them by understanding how they survive. The chamber remained silent. Earth proposes the creation of the Galactic Survival Coalition. A holographic emblem appeared above me. It belonged to humanity. It will belong to every civilization willing to learn. We will share survival training, emergency medicine, predator behavior, adaptive tactics, disaster response, and battlefield cooperation. I looked toward Kara. No species should have to discover these lessons alone. The speaker slowly nodded. General Kara Voss stood. "The Vorex Empire supports this proposal." The declaration shocked the chamber. She continued without hesitation. "I once believed human methods were primitive. I was wrong. Our fleets survived because one human officer ignored revenge and chose cooperation." One by one, other civilizations stood. The Illyrians, the Korath, the Narel Union. Even species that had openly mocked humanity voted in favor. The motion passed unanimously. As the session ended, I looked through the crystal dome at the stars beyond. We hadn't won because we were stronger. We hadn't won because we had better weapons. We had won because survival had never been about defeating an enemy. It had always been about making sure someone was still alive when the battle ended. That lesson was no longer humanity's alone. 5 years passed faster than I expected. The Ashen Rift was no longer a forbidden graveyard. Joint patrols crossed its borders every week, monitoring the remaining Void Reaper nests and ensuring they never again threatened the galaxy. The creatures had not been exterminated. They had simply learned that hunting organized prey carried too high a price. The Galactic Survival Coalition had grown far beyond humanity's original proposal. Its headquarters stood on a neutral world, built by dozens of civilizations working together. Soldiers who had once considered each other enemies now trained side by side. Vorex shock troops practiced evacuation drills with Illyrian medics. Korath engineers learned disaster response from human rescue teams. Every lesson came from experience earned through hardship rather than pride. I spent most of my days as an instructor, not because I was the smartest officer in the coalition, because I had survived long enough to understand what mattered. General Kara Voss became the coalition's military director. At first, many doubted the decision. They remembered her threats against humanity and her role in my capture. Kara never tried to defend her past. She simply worked harder than anyone else. Together we redesigned fleet training across the galaxy. Cadets no longer memorized only battle formations. They learned psychology, survival, adaptation, crisis leadership, and one lesson I insisted every class remember. The enemy doesn't care how strong you are. It only cares whether you make mistakes. Years earlier, Kara would have argued. Now she was the one repeating those words to new recruits. One afternoon we stood together overlooking a training field filled with soldiers from more than 40 civilizations. I once believed strength meant never changing, Kara admitted quietly. And now, she watched the recruits helping one another through an obstacle course. Now I know strength begins the moment pride ends. I smiled. The war between humanity and the Vorex Empire had never officially begun. Because of that, it had become one of the greatest alliances the galaxy had ever known. I stood beside General Kara Voss as the Galactic Council celebrated the 5th anniversary of the Survival Coalition. The same chamber that had once laughed at humanity now stood in respectful silence. Kara stepped onto the central platform and looked across the assembly. I once believed humanity's strength came from being born on a death world, she said. Her voice carried through the chamber without effort. After fighting beside them, I learned the truth. They endure what would break others. They adapt faster than fear. They survive when survival seems impossible. She turned toward me. But those are not their greatest strengths. The chamber remained silent. Their greatest strength is this. They choose to protect. They protect allies. They protect strangers. They even protect those who once called themselves enemies. She lowered her head toward me, a gesture no Vorex general gave lightly. I know, because one human chose to save me. As applause echoed through the council, I looked at the stars beyond the crystal dome. The galaxy had changed forever, not because humanity had conquered it, but because, when everything was falling apart, we chose to save it instead.